Righto. So first I want to show you how to set up for a titration, because if you don't rinse the things out correctly, then you're going to end up getting the wrong result. So the things that need to be rinsed is anything that we're going to pour solutions into. So we've got our burette needs to be rinsed, our conical flasks, which you'll have 2 or 3 of, have to be rinsed, our pipette or pipette, depending how you want to pronounce it, need to be rinsed. When I use my conical flasks, all I'm worried about is the amount of stuff that's in there, not the concentration anymore. So for these, I don't need to rinse them with anything other than distilled water. So what I usually do is give them a quick rinse with tap water, just so that I can actually not waste the distilled water, and then a couple of rinses with distilled water. But basically, you're wanting wherever things are going to touch. So we need to get the distilled water touching every surface, and then rinse it out. Probably rinse it out a couple of times, and we do that with each one. So your first bit of equipment we have to prepare is our conical flask or Erlenmeyer flask, just with distilled water. Alright? And the reason that we can just use water, or distilled water I should say, is that we're worried about amount, not concentration, once things have got into here. The next bit of equipment that we need to rinse out or prepare is either pipette or the burette. I'm going to do the burette. The burette, in here, the concentration of what goes in here is really, really important. So I need to make sure that I don't dilute it by having water in there. So if you do see that there's bits caught in the end or whatever, you're going to have to rinse it out with water first. So I'm going to assume that this looks really dirty, even though it's not, and I'm going to rinse it with water first. And normally what I do is I rinse both sides. So I let some of it pour out through the tap and everything, and then pour the rest out the top. Okay. Now if I was to pour my solution in here, there's still droplets of water. So what's that going to do to its concentration? Dilute it. So that's not good enough. So I read my instructions, and the instructions are telling me to put my standard solution, my sodium carbonate solution, into this burette. So therefore that must be what I rinse it with. Now this is an important solution. I can't use this all up rinsing, so I can't use too much. So what I normally do is turn the tap on, which will also get rid of the rest of the water. Okay. And using my funnel, because this needs to be rinsed as well, I'm going to put a little bit in until it starts collecting at the bottom. Okay, you can see it sort of collecting at the bottom there, so it's time to turn the tap off. Okay, my funnel is now rinsed, so that won't contaminate anything, so I can put that with everything else that's been rinsed. And what I'm going to do now is just pour this out until this air bubble here is gone. It's not going to, so I can give it a tap, and that will get rid of the air bubble. Then what's remaining, I'm going to pour out the top, spinning it so it touches all the surfaces. Now any droplets in there are my standard solution, not water. So now those droplets won't change the concentration. Then I put it in my clamp stand, and I clamp it below the 50 mark because I need to be able to see every single measurement on here. So I'm going to clamp it quite low. Not too tight, because this glass is quite thin and therefore a little brittle. And then I can fill it up with my solution. Sorry, wrong one nearly, that was a bit of a disaster. Essentially. You'll notice that I'm holding the funnel just off there so that I don't get air bubbles and so it doesn't splash down the side. And I'm watching the top to make sure that I don't fill it up too fast.
It was quite nice, wasn't it?
Okay, it's a bit of a painstaking slow bit, and I'm sorry about how boring the video is going to be right now. Apart from the fact that I forgot to stand on my steps so I can actually see what I'm doing properly. Okay.
We all just figured
Got a bit of parallax here or there.
Cool. So,
Shut up, Bella.
make sure you put your lid back on your volumetric flask afterwards as well. If it's warm enough, you could get some evaporation, which of course will make this more concentrated. So put the lid back on that. Then my next step is just to pour a little bit of it out. So I'll normally have a beaker handy, but I forgot one. So I'm just going to pour it into a test tube, just to make sure there's no air bubbles in here. So I'm just going to pour a little bit out, and there's no air bubbles, so that's fine. Okay. This doesn't have to start at the 0 mark, so don't be pedantic about that. It can start anywhere basically down to about 10 mils, because you're going to record that initial value. But the last thing that we have to prepare is our pipette. Now again, if it was really dirty, I'd rinse it with water first. I'm not going to do that this time, because it's actually very clean. Instead, what I need to do is I need to make sure that whatever I put in here doesn't get diluted. And there are some droplets up here that could change the concentration. You've been rinsed with water, so I know they're not going to affect my result. So I'm going to use my pipette filler, and I'm actually going to fill my pipette partially, so up to the bulb bit. Just by turning this dial here, it draws the solution up. And you'll see it's also made the droplets fall. Now I'm going to take that off and very quickly put my thumb over the top. And this is hydrochloric acid, so I don't really want it touching me. So what I'm going to do now is let it pour up to about where that yellow line is, and then pour it out into the sink. Now that this has been rinsed, I can put my unknown into my pipette without it actually changing concentration. And I normally just spin it just so I know that every surface is being touched. It's a thing that I got into when I was younger. Now when we're collecting this, normally the last little droplet, we need to just touch the side of the vessel we're collecting it in, so we take it. But because it was a rinse, I don't need to worry about it. Okay, so that's how you prepare everything. Just to summarise, conical flasks, distilled water. Distilled means it's got no other ions or anything in there that might contaminate it. Funnel and burette, rinsed with the actual solution that's about to go into them, and the pipette rinsed with the solution that's going to go into that. Okay, in the next video, I'll actually show you how to do a titration quickly, but also accurately.